Okay, we're going to follow up with a very quick overview on how to do this from yesterday's tutorial. So we were looking at creating rocky shoreline. It's actually pretty easy, just need to get a few things right first of all. Firstly, you want to be choosing your theme right. Now the ones that this works best in, generally you're looking for desert, works really well because it goes, well, as you can see, pretty rocky. The other ones it works nicely in. Tropical can work well, tends to be a little bit darker. Best one would be Delta, and Highlands it can go a nice rocky sort of colour as well. You're really looking for ones with islands. Steppe would do. To be honest, you can do it in most themes. The ones that you absolutely can't do this in would be, say, Swiss or Rustic, because those base textures just don't change at all. But you wouldn't really be using this as much on those anyway. Now in terms of how you do it, well, as you can see, it's basically just picking bits out of the ocean and kind of darkening out the terrain. Now base terrain in desert, if we skip over to somewhere where you got some, pretty rocky already, so we're onto a decent start. We just want to darken that out. So if we compare that to this, we just want to make it a little bit darker and kind of more jagged in places. The reason I chose to do it this way was because none of the rocks really the actual rocks really match the texture, and it was hard to get them to blend in. So in terms of how you do it, sculpting, you can go into raise and you can take one of the jagged brushes. It really doesn't matter which. I think actually for this one I used this, but I would use any of these, would work. The key thing is getting anything inside that little fuzzy blue line is going to go up quite sharply, whereas everything outside is going to stay exactly where it is. Whereas the more fuzzier ones, you're not going to get that big you're going to get only gradual change rather than that big variation. We're going to sink it down pretty small, and let's say raise it up by a foot. Now it's worth noting, even when you've got the brush quite small, the land isn't reacting perfectly because of how the game meshes. And we're going to kind of use that to our advantage a little bit. So let's take it at say 2 feet. You don't have to spin it around, I just get used to it. And we're just going to spam click a bit. And you get something like this, you then take it down a little bit more. Really what you want is just creating random-ish shapes that sort of fit with. There's no rhyme nor reason for this, but you're trying to make it look from a distance. You keep going back to your T, does it look roughly like what you want it to? I guess you could make the brush bigger, really just kind of experiment. But if you'll notice, the bigger you make it, the less jagged it's getting. So that's that. Now the final, that's really how I do it. The final aspect is then to brown it out even further. We're just going to place some trees, and the reason this works, I think, is because understandably if you were to plant a tree, then there's roots which are taking up water, so the game views it as browning out the terrain a little bit. You'll notice there it did it just a touch. If we undo, you can see the difference when we place it. But you don't want a load of trees over your coastline. However, the game thinks that if you're putting it below, well, those roots are still there, it's still taking up the water, it's still drying up the land. So if we sink it down, it's going to have the same effect. A couple of those works well. The final little tip with this, the bigger you make the tree, the more it's going to brown out that terrain. Now it's worth mentioning as well, this can interfere with frame rate, so it can cause lag if you do it too close to greens. So you just want to be wary of that. But as you can see, we can then do that. You can even kind of make it part of your planting as well, as you see with these trees here, and it serves a dual purpose. So if you are planning on planting the area, I'd suggest you do those trees first of all, and then do the buried trees last. You can always find them and delete them, and if you make them one type that you're not using anywhere else on the plot, you can always then just do select all, and you can see roughly where they are. So that's the tip, really. Not massively detailed, and I guess you then slowly go around the coastline. The other brush I used to do this around the coastline was this one. So shrinking that pretty far down to about here maybe, and doing 1 foot, and then just spinning around and poking holes in so that you come up with this sort of jagged coastline that doesn't look too super severe. So that's the end of this tip, and I hope that's useful. All of these I'm going to be posting on Twitter. They're just short picture tips, but if I can follow them up with a quick video, I will do.